They told him the war was over like it was an apology, not a fact. The chamber was polished to a mirror shine, curved walls humming with translation fields and recycled dignity. Representatives of 12 species sat in tiers, all watching him as if he were an unexploded device someone had politely labeled hero. He stood where they pointed, hands behind his back, posture learned the hard way. You didn't survive a galactic war by slouching, even after the shooting stopped. The presiding Vulpine leaned forward first. Tall, copper-furred, tail wrapped with ceremonial restraint, smiles sharpened to look friendly. Vulpines always smiled like they were counting something. Teeth, debts, weaknesses? Human veteran, she said, voice silken with authority. The Council recognizes your extensive engagements. He resisted the urge to correct her. Engagements was a funny word. It covered battles, sieges, blockades, and the kind of social encounters that ended with someone storming out and someone else pretending not to care. Just doing the job, he said. That line worked everywhere. Workplaces. Battlefields. Funerals. A hollow flickered behind her, numbers scrolling. Casualty curves. Conflict durations. Probability maps that all ended with humanity standing where no one expected them to. The war hadn't been won with bigger guns. It had been won with stubbornness, logistics, and an unsettling human willingness to keep going long after the enthusiasm died. In recognition, the Vulpine continued, the Council has approved a post-conflict recompense. A reward proportional to your capacity. He braced. Capacity was another one of those words. Humans used it for storage and patience. Aliens used it when they weren't sure if something would break. I don't need a parade, he said. Or a plaque. Honestly, I'd settle for transport clearance and a quiet assignment. A murmur rippled. Quiet assignment sounded scandalous, like declining dessert at a diplomatic banquet. The Vulpine's ears twitched. We anticipated your modesty, she said. Which is why this reward is supportive in nature. Supportive. He nodded automatically. Support was good. Support was medical leave, counseling credits, maybe a debrief that didn't end in another survey. Great, he said. I'm good with support. Another hollow appeared. A silhouette resolved into fur curves posture. A different Vulpine stepped forward from the side of the chamber, this one younger, eyes bright with a mix of training and terror. She wore the markings of a cultural liaison, neutral colors, layered insignia, tail unbound. Very official. Very close. This is your assigned companion, the presiding Vulpine announced. The word companion landed heavier than a metal. He glanced at the newcomer, then back to the Council. Sorry, he said, genuinely confused. Assigned, what now? Companion, the Vulpine repeated patiently, as if explaining a universal constant. For morale stabilization, cultural integration, and post-war adjustment. Adjustment. He exhaled through his nose. Is this like a handler? The chamber froze. A few translators stuttered. The younger Vulpine's ears went flat in what he would later learn was second-hand embarrassment. The presiding Vulpine recovered first. If by handler you mean a bonded support asset with reciprocal obligations, then yes. Broadly. He blinked. Handler had meant paperwork and check-ins. Bonded anything had not been on the list. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said carefully. I didn't request. Requests are unnecessary, the Vulpine said. This is a gift. Gifts were worse. Gifts came with expectations. He'd learned that the hard way too. What exactly does a companion do? He asked. The younger Vulpine straightened, clearly reciting from training. I will accompany you during your reintegration period. Monitor stress indicators. Facilitate social engagement. Ensure you do not experience prolonged isolation. Isolation. He almost laughed. I've been isolated for 3 years. It didn't kill me. The Council exchanged looks. Isolation not killing him was, apparently, the problem. The presiding Vulpine's tail flicked. Human resilience is impressive. However, the Council believes continued exposure to a stabilizing presence will reduce the likelihood of unsanctioned activity. He translated that internally as we don't trust you when you're bored. Fair. So this is like emotional support, he said. Yes, the Vulpine said quickly. And political leverage, he added. There was a pause just long enough to be an answer. Indirectly, she said. He rubbed his temple. Look, I appreciate the thought. Truly. But I'm not exactly companion material. I work long hours. I'm bad at small talk. I forget to eat. The younger Vulpine's eyes flicked to him, curious now. That hadn't been in the briefing. Those are common bonding stressors, she said softly, half to herself. Bonding. He caught it this time. No, he said firmer. Let's be clear. This isn't that. Right? The chamber went very quiet. The Vulpine representatives looked at one another like someone had asked whether gravity was optional. The presiding Vulpine smiled again, slower. Human, she said. Vulpine companions are assigned only in circumstances of significant attachment potential. He stared at her. Attachment to what? I'm a retired asset. Exactly. That explained too much. So I'm being parked, he said. With supervision. Supported, the Vulpine corrected. Closely. Considerately. He looked at the younger Vulpine again. She held his gaze this time, professional, assessing. Not flirtatious. Not predatory. Just present. That, somehow, was worse. Do I get a say? He asked her directly. Her ears twitched. You signed the acceptance clause. I signed a datapad without reading it, he said. That's not consent, that's habit. Another murmur. Humans and their habits had rewritten several sections of galactic law already. The presiding Vulpine lifted a hand. You may withdraw after the bonding period, she said. If compatibility proves insufficient. How long is the bonding period? He asked. The younger Vulpine answered. Minimum 6 cycles. Renewable. Renewable. Of course it was. And during that time, he said, what are the proximity requirements? The younger Vulpine consulted her implant. Shared quarters are recommended. Continuous access preferred. The chamber held its breath. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Shared quarters meant bunking, schedules, awkward silences, and the kind of intimacy that came from knowing someone's sleep habits. He'd done worse. He'd survived worse. Fine, he said. I can do 6 cycles. The Council visibly relaxed, like a predator that had successfully coaxed prey into a comfortable enclosure. The presiding Vulpine inclined her head. Excellent. We are confident this assignment will be fulfilling. He snorted. Don't oversell it. As the formalities wrapped up, the younger Vulpine stepped closer, lowering her voice. For what it's worth, she said. I was told humans value honesty. We do, he said. Eventually. Her tail flicked in what might have been amusement. Then I will be honest. Many believe you are being rewarded. Some believe you are being restrained. And you? He asked. She considered him, eyes sharp and curious. I believe, she said, that you are underestimating how many battles you are still fighting. He smiled thinly. Story of my life. The chamber lights dimmed, signaling dismissal. As he turned to leave, datapad tucked under his arm, he realized the galaxy hadn't given him peace. It had given him supervision with fur and a smile. He didn't know yet whether that made things safer or far more dangerous, but he knew one thing for sure. This was going to be work. They gave him quarters that were technically neutral territory, which in Council language meant no one wanted responsibility if something went wrong. Clean lines, adjustable gravity, furniture that tried very hard to accommodate every known spine configuration and succeeded at none. He dropped his bag by the door and did the universal human survey of a new space, exits, blind spots, places to sit that wouldn't collapse. Habit, not paranoia. Mostly. The Vulpine followed him in with professional calm, tail swaying just enough to signal awareness without invitation. She took in the room with sharper eyes than the decor deserved. "This meets minimum compatibility standards," she said. "High praise," he replied. "So how does this work? You observe? I ignore you? We both pretend this is normal." She tilted her head. "That is one possible engagement model." He paused. "See, when humans say engagement, it usually means commitment. Or a fight. Sometimes both." Her ears flicked. Our translators flagged that ambiguity. It was noted as concerning. "Yeah," he said. "Get used to that." She activated her console, a soft glow outlining data fields. "I am required to log our interactions. Stress indicators. Adaptive responses. Withdrawal frequency." "Withdrawal?" he asked. She glanced up. "Tactical retreats. Emotional disengagement. Temporary isolation." "Ah," he said. "You mean when I go quiet?" "Yes." "That happens," he said. "Doesn't mean anything's wrong." Her tail stilled. "In Vulpine culture, silence during bonding is a sign of impending conflict." He smiled. "In human culture, it's Tuesday." That earned a small, involuntary huff from her. First crack in the professional shell. "Interesting. I should introduce myself," she said. "My designation is Serix." "Designation?" he asked. "Names are flexible," she said carefully. "You may use it." He nodded. "I'm Jonah." She repeated it once, softly, like testing the weight. "Jonah. Your file indicates you have concluded 28 major engagements." "Depends how you define major," he said. Her eyes sharpened. "The Council defines them as sustained conflicts with a measurable risk of loss." "Then yeah," he said. 28. She hesitated. "You show no physiological pride response." "Should I?" he asked. "In Vulpine society, such a number would be boast-worthy." He shrugged. "Boasting doesn't make them hurt less." That one landed. She logged something, claws tapping lightly. "You speak of pain casually. You get used to it," he said. "Like gravity. It's there whether you acknowledge it or not." She looked at him longer this time, curiosity overtaking protocol. "Were these engagements voluntary?" He laughed once, sharp. "None of the important ones." They settled into an awkward rhythm over the next few cycles. She observed. He complied just enough to avoid reports. She asked questions that sounded clinical but drifted into personal territory when she forgot herself. He answered honestly, then regretted it, then answered anyway. It was a familiar dance. He'd done it with medics, counselors, commanders who pretended to care. The difference was that Serix listened like the answers mattered. She learned quickly. Learned his tells. When his jaw tightened, it meant he was calculating exits. When his humor got drier, it meant he was tired. When he offered to make food, it meant he didn't want to talk. She noted his habits with a mixture of fascination and quiet alarm. "You consume stimulants excessively," she said one morning, watching him pour another cup of coffee. "You track caffeine intake?" he asked. "I track coping mechanisms." "Same thing," he said, sipping. She tried human food once and nearly declared it a hostile act. He laughed until his sides hurt, which surprised them both. Humor, he realized, was a battle too. One you won by surviving the punchline. The double meanings piled up faster than reports. When she asked about his readiness, he talked about emotional stamina. When she asked about his capacity, he described how much disappointment he could carry before something broke. When she asked about previous bonds, he spoke of friendships that ended quietly and relationships that ended loudly. Every word meant two things, and the translator did its best and failed beautifully. At one point she asked, "How do humans recover after repeated withdrawals?" He nearly choked on his drink. "Usually with distance and bad decisions." She logged that. "Bad decisions are common post-conflict behaviors." "See?" he said. We're very predictable. The galaxy disagreed. The more Serix reported, the more confused the council became. Humans were supposed to be aggressive, dominant, reckless. What she described was persistence. Adaptation? A species that treated survival like a long-term project and pain like an operating cost. The council had thought assigning a companion would soften him. Instead, it revealed something worse. You don't escalate, she said one evening, reviewing her logs. When provoked, you de-escalate. Most of the time, he said. Escalation's expensive. But when you do escalate, she continued, the outcome is decisive. He didn't answer right away. Because by then, he said finally, we've tried everything else. She looked at him with something new in her expression. Respect, maybe? Or concern. In Vulpine doctrine, she said, that level of restraint is considered dominance. He snorted. Tell that to my last commanding officer. The proximity changed things. Not in the way the council expected, but in the way close quarters always did. They learned each other's rhythms. Sleep cycles overlapped. Conversation stretched. Silence stopped feeling like a threat. She caught him humming sometimes, tuneless and quiet. He caught her watching his hands when he worked, fascinated by the scars and steadiness. One cycle, she asked? Why did you stop fighting? He thought about it. I didn't, he said. I just stopped shooting. She absorbed that in silence. No logging. No follow-up. Just understanding settling into place like a new piece of furniture neither of them had asked for but both adjusted around. The council called for an interim evaluation. Serix stood before them, posture formal, tail bound again. The assignment is progressing, she reported. The human demonstrates stable adaptation. And the risk? The presiding Vulpine asked. Serix hesitated. The risk remains, she said carefully. But not in the way anticipated. How so? Another delegate pressed. He is not dangerous because he seeks conflict, she said. He is dangerous because he avoids it. The chamber went still. Back in their quarters, Jonah waited, pretending not to listen to the incoming message ping. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. They are extending the bonding period, she said. He nodded. Of course they are. They asked if you were aware of the influence you exert, she added. And? He asked. I told them the truth, she said. You are not exerting influence. You are enduring. He smiled, tired but genuine. That's kind of our thing. She studied him, ears relaxed now, tail unbound. Jonah, she said, how many of your engagements were victories? He considered the question, then shrugged. Depends who's counting. And how many did you lose? She asked softly. He laughed, a quiet sound edged with something real. We don't talk about those, he said. We just live with them. She didn't log that either. The extension changed the tone more than the schedule. Time stopped being something counted down and started being something filled. The council's interest intensified, which meant more check-ins, more data requests, more subtle pressure on Serix to classify what couldn't be neatly boxed. She complied where she could and stalled where she couldn't, a skill she was learning rapidly from her human assignment. Jonah noticed the shift immediately. They're leaning on you, he said one morning, not looking up from his mug. Serix paused. Your perception accuracy continues to exceed projections. Yeah, he said. That's usually how I know something's about to go wrong. She studied him. You assume conflict is inevitable. I assume friction, he corrected. Conflict's optional. She logged that one. It annoyed him less than it should have. The council wanted demonstrations. Not of force, that box was checked, but of compatibility. They invited observers under the guise of cultural audits. Vulpine analysts. Avian tacticians. One mollusk economist who never blinked and asked deeply uncomfortable questions about resource sharing. Through it all, Jonah remained stubbornly ordinary. He made jokes that didn't land. He deferred decisions. He apologized when he bumped into people. The galaxy didn't know what to do with a conqueror who said, "My bad." Syrinx began to understand that this was the point. Humans didn't dominate by standing taller. They did it by staying longer. One auditor asked, "How do you maintain readiness without active conflict?" Jonah answered, "Same way you keep a relationship alive. Maintenance, communication, knowing when to shut up." The translator choked on relationship. Syrinx watched 3 delegates stiffen. "Relationship implies bonding," one said sharply. Jonah shrugged. "Everything implies bonding if you stick around long enough." That got flagged. The council sent a clarification request within the hour. Later, Syrinx confronted him gently. "You are complicating the narrative." "Sorry," he said. "Habit." "Why do you speak so openly?" she asked. "You know your words create instability." He leaned back. "Because if they're scared of honesty, that's not my problem. I fought a war. I'm not fighting a conversation." That, more than anything, unsettled her. Vulpines planned. Humans adapted. But Jonah did something else entirely. He accepted consequences as a given and moved anyway. The double meanings kept stacking. When asked about performance, he talked about consistency. When asked about stamina, he talked about burnout. When asked about loyalty, he talked about boundaries. Every answer was useful and useless at the same time, like a riddle that refused to resolve. Syrinx found herself defending him in closed sessions. "He is not manipulating us," she said more than once. "He is being himself." "And what is that?" the presiding Vulpine demanded. Syrinx hesitated. "Persistent," she said. "Uncomfortable. Honest to the point of irritation." The council did not like traits it couldn't weaponize. Pressure mounted. The bonding period, originally a leash, was now being reframed as a test. If Jonah destabilized the post-war balance, the experiment would be terminated. Terminated was another flexible word. Jonah knew that too. "You could leave," Syrinx told him one night. "Request reassignment. Invoke fatigue protocols." He shook his head. "Nah." "Why not?" she pressed. "Because then they win," he said. "Not the war. The story. They get to say humans break when things get weird." She frowned. "Things are already weird." He smiled. "Exactly. We're still here." She realized then that the council hadn't given him a companion to soften him. They'd given him a witness. Someone to confirm, in official language, that humanity wasn't an accident. It was a choice. The realization scared her. An incident forced the issue. A Vulpine delegate overstepped, attempting to reclassify Jonah's status from veteran to asset in reserve. Paperwork, language tweaks, nothing violent. Jonah read the notice, exhaled, and did something the galaxy found far more alarming than aggression. He laughed. "Is that defiance?" the delegate asked, bristling. "No," Jonah said. "That's experience." Syrinx felt the room tilt. "You cannot simply refuse," the delegate snapped. Jonah nodded. "Sure I can. Watch." He declined politely. Cited clauses. Offered alternatives. Took responsibility without surrendering autonomy. It was bureaucratic judo, and the council had no defense. They'd never fought a species that treated rules like tools instead of commandments. Afterward, Syrinx confronted him, voice low. "You undermined them." "I participated," he said. "They just didn't like the outcome." "You could have escalated," she said. "And made it easy?" he replied. "Nah." Something shifted in her then, a deep recalibration. Vulpines respected cunning. Humans respected endurance. Jonah respected himself, quietly, without ceremony. It was unsettling. It was attractive, in a way that had nothing to do with instinct and everything to do with trust. She caught herself logging fewer observations and sharing more moments. Long conversations about nothing. Shared silence that felt earned. He asked about her training. She admitted it hadn't prepared her for someone who didn't want anything from her. That's the trick, he said. When you stop wanting, you start choosing. The council summoned them together for a final evaluation. Not an ending, but a pivot. They wanted to know if the experiment had succeeded. Define success, Jonah said. They tried. Metrics. Stability indices. Influence maps. Syrinx listened, then spoke out of turn. You asked if assigning a Vulpine would neutralize a human, she said. It has not. The chamber tensed. It has clarified him, she continued. And in doing so, clarified us. Jonah glanced at her, surprised. He does not conquer through force, she said. He survives through acceptance. He does not seek dominance. He practices it by refusing to be diminished. Silence. Dangerous silence. The presiding Vulpine asked. And your recommendation? Syrinx didn't look away. End the test. Not because it failed. Because it succeeded beyond control. Jonah smiled faintly. Told you it'd get weird. The council adjourned without a decision, which was its own answer. Back in their quarters, Jonah stretched, tired. So, he said, how'd I do? Syrinx studied him, really studied him, without protocol between them. You did not win, she said. He nodded. Good. You endured, she added. He met her gaze. Better. She felt it then, the weight of all the uncounted battles, the ones that didn't make reports. The ones humans never bragged about. The ones they carried quietly, like gravity. And Jonah? She asked, voice softer than before. If this continues, are you prepared? He considered, then smiled, calm and certain. I've been preparing my whole life, he said. I just didn't know what for. The decision came the way most galactic decisions did, slowly, indirectly, and with enough deniability to pretend no one had chosen anything. The council issued a statement praising cooperation, resilience, and successful cross-cultural exposure, which Jonah translated as we don't know what to do with you, so please keep existing somewhere else. Syrinx read it twice, ears flicking with irritation. They are dissolving the assignment, she said. Without admitting it. Jonah nodded. Classic. They are also, she added, requesting that I remain with you. Voluntarily. He looked at her then, really looked. And I have accepted, she said. No hesitation. No script. He smiled, a small one. Guess that means I finally passed probation. Do not be smug, she said, tail betraying amusement. You have redefined probation. The galaxy reacted exactly as expected and completely wrong. Rumors spread. Analysts whispered. Vulpine commentators argued whether the human had been domesticated or unleashed. Other species quietly updated their threat assessments to include terms like emotional persistence and administrative resistance. Humanity, it turned out, wasn't terrifying because it fought wars. It was terrifying because it kept showing up afterward. Life settled into something resembling normal, if normal meant joint briefings, shared meals, and the occasional diplomatic incident caused by Jonah answering too honestly. Syrinx learned to preemptively soften his phrasing. Jonah learned when to stop talking. They both learned that coexistence wasn't about balance so much as tolerance for imbalance. One evening, after a particularly tedious symposium on post-war ethics, Syrinx asked, Do humans always make others uncomfortable when peace is declared? Jonah considered. Only the ones who benefit from things staying broken. She logged nothing. She didn't need to. The adult comedy of it all never stopped being funny, in a quiet, relentless way. Council members still blushed when Jonah used words like engagement and withdrawal with casual precision. Vulpine still overanalyzed his body language, convinced every relaxed posture concealed intent. Jonah still drank too much coffee and treated emotional vulnerability like a maintenance task you scheduled whether you wanted to or not. At one reception, a junior delegate asked Syrinx, Is the human aware of his appeal? Syrinx glanced at Jonah, who was explaining sarcasm to a crystalline being that did not appreciate irony. He is aware, she said, and uninterested. That answer caused more panic than flirting ever could. The final test came quietly. No summons. No chamber. Just a question slipped into a routine report request. The council wanted to know how many conflicts Jonah believed he could still endure before becoming unstable. It was a trap wrapped in concern. Sarek showed him the message. You do not have to answer, she said. Jonah read it, then shrugged. Sure I do. He dictated the response himself. Not a number. Not a boast. Just a statement. Humans do not count endurance. We discover it. The council never replied. Later, sitting together in the soft artificial dusk of the station, Sarek asked the question that had been circling since the beginning. When the war ended, she said, and they gave you a Vulpine, did you think it was a reward? Jonah leaned back, hands folded. I thought it was supervision. And now? He smiled, tired and genuine. Now I think it was a misunderstanding. She tilted her head. In whose favor? He looked at her. Yours, maybe. Mine, definitely. She considered that, tail swaying slowly. You were never flexing, were you? When you spoke of battles. No, he said. I was being polite. That finally made her laugh, a sharp, surprised sound that drew looks from across the room. She didn't care. The galaxy had survived humanity's guns. It was still learning to survive humanity's honesty. One last message arrived weeks later, marked low priority. A Vulpine official, younger and clearly nervous, requested clarification for archival purposes. Just one question. Sarek read it aloud, voice steady. They ask, how many of your engagements ended in failure? Jonah chuckled, shaking his head. That's not a number you archive. And what should I tell them? She asked. He stood, stretching, scars catching the light. Tell them we don't measure ourselves that way, he said. Tell them we remember, adapt, and move on. She sent the reply unchanged. Somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the galaxy, a file closed without answers. And for the first time since the war ended, Jonah felt something close to peace, not because the battles were over, but because no one expected him to stop being human. Sarek watched him, understanding at last. Humanity hadn't won by conquering the galaxy. It had won by refusing to freeze when everything else did.